Attention is in short supply these days, yet it is important to executive function, doing well in school, and overall life success. Hi, I'm Jeff Coleman, and this is Attention, Ladies and Gentlemen, a show for teachers and parents who want to learn more about attention and what we can do to help our children be more successful in school and life. So if I could have your attention, we will get started. Hey, before we get started today, I wanted to tell you about a fun way to train attention skills from our show's sponsor, Brainly. Where you look and where you are planning to look is where you are placing your attention. The Attention Arcade leverages this connection to train attention skills with specially designed video games that children control using only their eyes. You can learn more by going to attentionarcade.com. Welcome to Attention, Ladies and Gentlemen. Today I'm excited to be talking with Dr. Joan Blanusa. She is a graduate of the Harvard School of Education and a former educator, and still does a former teacher and administrator, and still works with students today. Joan, welcome.
Thank you very much. I look forward to this.
So tell us a little bit about how you got interested in education and the work that you do.
Oh, I've been interested in education for over 35 years. I love to learn. And so I wanted to be in a field where learning was the main reason. And so that's how I got interested in education. I started as a high school social studies teacher. I then moved into administration. I then moved into teaching teachers and supervising student teachers, and then teaching learning and development, then did my doctorate in teaching and learning, and have taught from adults all the way down to 8th grade. That's my remit.
Okay. And what are you doing now? I know you're not in a school teaching right now.
No, I tutor. I provide academic support for anyone. Actually, I just agreed to work with someone 14, which is really unique, but I met with the person.
Okay.
And so I can tutor anything except for the content of math and science because of my background in teaching and learning. And I had started a doctorate 30 years ago in curriculum writing and critical thinking and what fosters critical thinking and love of learning, etc. Didn't finish that, came back in 2000 and finished it. So I didn't want to go back to the school calendar, and I found I had something to offer for people who needed extra help. Okay. So that's what I do.
And, this show's all about attention. So I'd kind of like your perspective on how do you think about attention, or how would you define it, particularly in students that you're working with?
Well, attention for me is almost synonymous with engagement. So it's just part and parcel to how I teach and what I do. It's something I'm on the lookout for all the time. And so how do I think about it? It's how have I kept a student engaged in whatever we were doing. And that was true when I taught in a classroom of 25 students, or in a graduate school seminar of 12, right, to one-on-one right now. So I have a huge toolbox of things I can use to engage a person and make sure they stay engaged. Or if I feel like I'm losing their attention, which I will ask about. I'm very explicit. I have no shame or embarrassment about asking, are you bored now? Or okay, I just saw your eyes drift off. Where are you? It's just part and parcel to what I do, and I make it a focus of my work. I don't know how a student would learn anything if they're not paying attention.
Right.
Now, absolutely. I could also get into attention in terms of deep philosophical sense too, but we don't need to go there right now.
Well, let's not go there today. Maybe a different conversation.
Yeah.
So of the students you've worked with over the years, how have you seen, obviously you just said it's critical to them really learning anything, but how have you seen attention challenges come into play? How does it impact their learning if they're really struggling with attention?
Well, I'm struggling with the question how. I mean, a lot of kids now are diagnosed with ADHD and
Right.
ADD, or they're neurodiverse. And that is something I recognize, and we'll have to work with and create strategies to make sure that person is focused. I come from a very, I have a strong background in educational psychology and human development. So I do a lot to try and ascertain if there are any psychological or psycho-emotional, social-emotional issues going on behind attention. 99.9% of the time, that's a huge factor. And especially when I get to work one-on-one, I get to address that factor.
Right.
I go out of my way to really find, and that really is a key point. So even like, for example, I'm working with students who have been diagnosed with ADHD. That's a given to me. So I'm going to work with that. At the same time, I would suspect that then manifests in terms of psychosocial confidence building, motivation, etc. So I try and come at the ADHD through those other areas, through motivation, through distraction, anxiety, and address those issues. And I find if I can catch or meet a student where they are interested, or they feel they can trust me and they can talk about things, it actually, I won't say it counters the ADHD, but they become engaged, to be honest. They feel like they're being heard, they're listened to. So it becomes a way for them to manage it. And I watch it kind of I won't say dissipate altogether, but it will go to the side. And we then engage in a real life conversation or a learning conversation of something. And that becomes then a sense of accomplishment on their part in the way they feel. Okay. As we say, most kids remember how they feel. And if they know, wow, I did that, I can do that again, the next time we meet, they'll let themselves become engaged. And that's how I deal with it. That's one of the ways. Right.
No, that's
the one-on-one. I could also say how I dealt with it in a classroom.
We have educators listening to this as well, so that would be fantastic.
Well, I've always made it a point. And I taught classes with 25 students regularly, and I taught freshmen, sophomores, seniors. It was part and parcel to teaching for me to build connections with each student, and to try and understand. And I had my eyes out all the time. If someone wasn't paying attention and they were sleepy, they were agitated, whatever, and I reached out to them and talked to them about what's going on. If they had an IEP, I read that and worked with them. But I would say my secret sauce to teaching is all in building trusting, boundaried relationships with students. Right. And if I felt like, for example, I did this more with freshmen. If a student wasn't paying attention, we always sat in a circle, and I sat in a student's desk in that circle with them. Okay. I would have seating charts, and I would put students who I felt were struggling with attention and stuff on either side of me, so that they knew they had my attention. Right. And that way I could also, like if I were holding a class discussion and I wanted to ask a question, I could look over their shoulder and see, oh, they've got the right answer. So I would purposely call on them to know I was paying attention to them, and they'd have the right answer, and that would become like a symbiosis. They would feel better about themselves. And then once I felt like, okay, I can move the kids around again, I put other kids there. But if I felt a student was distracted in class, I would cold call, or I would say, what do you think about this? Or I noticed you've been quiet, or I would call them out. And kids say they hate that to some extent. Sure. They do. But at the same time, I'm delivering the message that I'm paying attention. Right. I'm paying attention to you, and I'm aware your attention isn't here, and that matters to me. Yes. I want your attention here. You matter to me. Yeah. I think you can be a part of this. So I mean, I remember one time I had overheard a kid breaking that he really just gets distracted in class and he doodles. And someone overheard him breaking about this. And it was a swim coach, came up to me and said, I think you would like to know that he's breaking about doing this in your class. And and I did like to know. And the next day in class, they were working on something, and I went over and whispered in his ear and said, I hear you think you're getting away with doodling in my class and not paying attention. And he just jumped out of his seat. So that's the kind of thing I would do. It never intimidated me. And to this day, students say they felt like they really mattered in my class. Mm-hmm. And I was aware of the other way I could pay attention is the reason I give homework is for me to evaluate, are they learning anything?
Right.
And if I felt like a student was not doing well or they weren't doing well as a whole, I either had to check myself, but also it was a way for me to give feedback in terms of what's going on here. Why aren't you understanding this? Why didn't you complete this? Are you not paying attention to what's going on in class?
Right.
So that's,
right.
like I said, going back full circle, attention is just essential to learning. And if you're going to be a good teacher, you've got to pay attention to those who aren't paying attention.
Yeah. So you really focus on the emotional connection with students as making them want to, and this actually matches with another educator we had on the program, where she said she always tried to connect with kids because that was when they felt they wanted to please, and when they feel like you actually care about what they're doing, they want to do the best job they can given their skill set.
Oh, and I've had so many students who's now I work with their children who said, I always wanted to work hard for you because you work so hard for us. And then another student said of course I did the reading. I knew you could call on me, and I didn't want to be embarrassed, but also I really liked what we learned. You made it really fun and interesting. But yes, caring about them, and they can pick that up right away. And I got to say, in caring, and I bet the other person would say this too. So if I learned you had learning issues, etc., right. I then also went out of my way to find what would really help you then with your attention issues.
So do you have any examples of things that worked or that you found with particular students?
Like I know about your product, Brain Leap.
Yeah.
I don't have to use that now, but that would be something, if I knew about it, I would inform my student, let's try this.
Sure.
I'm very open to whatever would work with the student to help them with holding on to their attention. I would probably go to the resources departments in schools and say, what do you have? What can we do?
Right.
What keeps your attention? What interests you? Some kids, it's video games. Some kids, it's listening to music. A lot of kids, especially with ADHD, I found were fidgety.
Right. And
if you force them to stop fidgeting, they just lost all their focus. And a lot of teachers would complain about the fidgeting. Right. So I remember one student I was working with when I was tutoring, and he fidgeted with a fidgeter all the time.
Yeah.
And he was totally oblivious. He also then learned how to do the Rubik's Cube. So when we'd be working, he'd be doing that with one hand and getting it right while he and I were learning. So that just kind of gives you a spectrum in terms of where I would go and whatever works for you. But I would do a lot of research in terms of wanting to do something. And in doing that, the students really see, wow, you don't only care for me, you're really interested in who I am as a unique individual. Right. And I don't feel ashamed or embarrassed because a lot of kids do have shame around that or embarrassment. Okay. And, or they think there's something wrong with them for this being the thing. And that's the other thing I really try to disabuse them of, saying whatever works for you works for you. Right. And I give them examples of silly things that work for me to kind of help them, free them up to really think outside of the box and to feel free to be honest with the things that work for them. And remember, I work with high schoolers and adults, so they're also at an age where they feel capable and are capable of identifying those things that work for them.
Right. Okay. And when you get these kids motivated with, you know, the feeling that they're being cared for and that they're, you know, that you're providing them the support, how does that, what do you see in terms of engagement? Do they stay much more engaged as they okay.
They look forward to, they have fun.
Uh-huh.
They look forward to our sessions, or they look forward to my class. I remember when I taught graduate school, and I taught a class from 6:30 to 9:30 at night, and this would be after they'd already taught all day.
Yep. And
they would be honest about, okay, I really didn't want to come tonight. They'd be honest with me, but you know, every time I leave here, I feel so energized. So I forget the question because I just went off track there. I lost my attention.
No, it was just how did you see the caring and the how did it improve their engagement? And
they did their work. They came to class on time. They come to sessions. I'm the one who usually had to say, okay, time's up. They stay in touch with me after. I mean, there's a student I worked with. We would be for an hour, and he would keep talking. I mean, he could have gone for 2 easily. And his mother, to this day, says, you know, thank you. I mean, he used to hate to write. He could not get his butt in the chair to write, and now he loves to write. And, you know, and it's also, because I started off with, this goes back to caring. I really listen. And so when he talked about things that were of interest to him, I was genuinely interested in what he was talking about. And he was talking about games and things that I didn't know anything about.
Right.
I love learning from them, what they're interested in.
Sure.
That interaction and the body language, everything that comes through is so profound and so essential. It really can make the difference. And you see it in the work. So like when they return with the homework, it's like, whoa, great job. You did something on this.
Right.
So it's manifested in every way you want to see it manifested.
Got it. Are there any resources you'd recommend to educators or parents about this kind of mindset that you're bringing to it? Is there anything you've seen over the years that if they wanted to, you know, obviously they can listen to this podcast, but it's just, you know, a little bit of time. Is there any books or other resources you'd recommend to help them kind of get into this mindset and think about it from the perspective you are?
Yeah, there's a plethora. I can identify the books that were seminal to me in my work, and actually it wasn't just the books, it was where I went for my master's. They really modeled what they expected of us while they taught it. We learned a lot in psychology from Carl Rogers, the humanistic approach. At the time, in the 80s, there was a lot of work being done on the ethic of caring in the classroom that gave it gravitas rather than some type of mushy, syrupy, feel-good thing. And Nell Nodding's work on the ethic of caring is the foundation of what I do. John Dewey's work on democratic education is at the foundation of what I do. Off the top of my head, and then when I worked with adults, I was really influenced by Robert Keegan's work on how we make meaning of the world and adult development, and what he identified are more complex forms of making meaning. And one of the things I really liked about his work, and I studied his work because I was having difficulty understanding why some adults could not do this, have this mindset. Also, even why some parents were having a hard time saying no to their child. I often had parents asking me, how did you do that? How did you say no? How did you discipline? How did you do that?
Right.
And that surprised me because at the time, I was in my 30s. They were all much older. And I don't mean to disparage or anything like that, but it was kind of shocking to me. I'm thinking, how do you not say no? And the thing is, I could discipline always in a way where a student wasn't humiliated.
Right.
They knew the rules, and I had very few rules. You don't need to. Actually, if you show you really care about students and it's about you matter and I want you all to learn and I'm really invested in this, you need very few rules. Where I got that mindset, I would have to say, came from my teacher training program. But it also just fit my personality. Right. It's who I am as a person. Okay. And then where I did my student teaching, the people I had as supervisors were all the same way. They were some of the most meaningful and important people in my life, who I actually got to, one of my student teaching supervisors, she was also a vice principal, so I got to also see that side of it. Right. But they really role modeled that for me too. And they talked a lot about fear, and when I became a teacher, to really disabuse me of fear. And I remember one person gave me really great advice, said, there are really two strong feelings in the classroom, fear and love. And most kids in there are afraid of being unloved. And, and a lot of what I hate is in the modern world, a lot of that stuff has become really sappy. It's not seen as really, and it really came down to that. So when kids would misbehave or they were acting out, to me, it was always, okay, that's a cry for help. They're teenagers. So I'm going to go back to Robert Keegan's work. Why I really liked him was he really identified the difference between adults and adolescents without making adolescents seem less than. It was embracing that period of life, that transformation of life, and showing an adult is at this other period of life.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so there was no power over type of dynamic going on there. And so one of the things so when I became a teacher, one of the things you really had to be disabused of were all your noble thoughts. But being disabused of that takes work, and you've got to be very humble. I remember saying to one supervising student teacher, saying, I don't care what they think about me. I just want them to learn. And he just cracked up, just bold-faced who are you kidding? You want them to love you. I mean, you want them to think you're the best thing that's ever walked in the face of the earth. You got to acknowledge that, because you're going to have to tolerate them not liking you to get them to learn.
Right.
And that was like, he's right. And that was probably the best piece of advice I ever got. Because as a teacher, you have to tolerate their angst and learning how to tolerate that and knowing you can and not take it personally. And I have to say, that's where Ed Psych really helped out and adult development. And you got to try it. The first time I did that, I was like, oh, I can handle this. But I was also around a lot of other adults who were saying, yeah, this isn't about you. This is about this kid's uncomfortable right now. You've made him uncomfortable, probably for a good reason. Let him know you're providing a safe space and you care. You're not out there to humiliate that kid or to shame him or to make them feel like they're stupid. Right. You've put him in a place of unknowing where they have to go, which also could be called curiosity. And you've got to then provide the scaffolding where they are, because otherwise you're going to lose their attention.
Yep.
To help them get into the place of, okay, I can tolerate this unknowing. Mm-hmm. And I'm curious. I want to know where I'm going to go next.
Right. And it's so important that they not feel any shame around it. Because that's when you lose kids, particularly at the middle school, high school age, where, you don't want to look be embarrassed in front of your friends and your classmates. So that's just huge. And if we tie that back into attention, particularly kids who are struggling with it, knowing that they can talk about the challenges they're having, maybe they can't stay focused for, as long as a lot of the students in a reading assignment, so it takes them longer to get through something. But that's okay, because that's you, and you have to do you. I actually talked with, he's an entrepreneur who used to study in his bathtub, because that was the place where, and he's been diagnosed with ADHD and actually created a product to help people like that. But, he had to do him to make it work. And his mom, was a little concerned at the time, but, it worked for him. And, just figuring that out and doing it in a safe space makes all the difference to students.
Well, that gets back to what I say is what works for you. I mean, it can be as kooky as you want, or as just seemingly, lazy. I often get parents saying, my child's so lazy, they just do this. And I'm thinking, I remember having an argument with one student saying, you will never, ever, ever convince me that you are lazy. And he was just, but everyone says, I'm sorry. I don't believe an adolescent can be lazy. I think that's what I would say is you're not motivated. And I've got to figure out a way to motivate you.
Yeah. But
I will not buy lazy. I want to say something back to the shame and feeling like you can't do it. I have, unfortunately, been in schools where there is a very rigid culture of kids who can and kids who can't.
Yes.
And that was those were the most painful experiences of my life. And to the point, I was upsetting that culture so much that they came after me. So I don't know how a kid, well, you've got to really also identify the culture of the school, the culture of the community.
Yes.
And one teacher in and of him or herself cannot change that.
Sure.
And you can have the people who are benefiting from those who can, who really don't like that paradigm being disrupted.
Yeah.
The kids who are learning, yes, you can, like that paradigm being disrupted, but it can create horrible tension and disrespectful behavior in the classroom.
Right.
And as a teacher, it can be very hard to get back up supporting what you're saying. So I don't want to ever dismiss the power of the culture of the community or the school.
Sure. Absolutely.
There is one thing. Can I say what Nell Nodding's ethic of caring is and why I think it's so powerful?
Absolutely. I'd love to hear it.
Okay. Well, she breaks up caring into two components. The one caring and the cared for. And there are some relationships in our lives where we switch those roles. And that's like marriages, peers with friends,
okay,
etc. There are others that are asymmetrical,
right,
where you are always the one caring and the other is always the cared for. And that's the teacher, student, therapist, patient, doctor, parent, child.
Yeah.
And as the one caring, and she wrote for education, so I saw this as my job. My job as the one caring, she said, is that she calls it motivational displacement. In other words, my motivation isn't mine, it's yours. I have to find yours. So it's just displaced from me onto you.
Okay.
What motivates you? And she says that you do that by becoming engrossed in the other.
Huh.
So engrossment is the other characteristic of the one caring.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Absolutely. So
there's no coffee about this whatsoever. It can be really difficult.
Well, I mean, I've seen it in action. When you talk to, a 6-7-year-old kid who is fascinated by ants. I met a young man who was, and he wanted to tell you everything about those ants.
Yes.
And, naturally, I'm not that excited about ants, but his his motivation and enthusiasm for it was, one, infectious, and two, I recognized there was nothing more he wanted to do than to explain this to me. And you get that. Like, if you can keep kids engaged in the things and talking about, and I heard one parent talking about how he had used horseback riding for his daughter to teach her about math and caring for things, because, you know, there are all these pieces of it, and, you know, a horse is expensive, and, you know, you have to figure out how to, and making sure you order enough feed and all of that. If you can get kids engrossed in the things they care about and tie in all of the things they need to learn, you know, then they're going to be very excited about doing all of that stuff. So,
and you've just captured then what the cared for response is. They get excited. They give you a thank you, but a thank you isn't necessarily thank you. It's in wanting to talk to you further. It's in wanting to be engaged. And she broke it up that easily. So, and engrossment is, I see you're engrossed. Now I'm going to get engrossed in what you're engrossed in.
Yes. And that's what you were talking about at the beginning.
That is, when I read that work, she just captured, oh, this is what it is. And I'll be honest, I used to teach her theory when I taught civics, because I argued these are the qualities of a democratic society. And my students loved it to the point that I'll never forget. It was the end of a senior year, and I'd given a quiz or something, and I got a little distracted myself, and I think I made an off-the-cuff comment. And one student who I would have never, ever expected would retain anything like that said, "God, Miss Blanusa, that wasn't very caring of you." We all just erupted, and I personally was, you remember that? I was just so pleased that he had remembered this. It just, I mean, that was 30 years ago, and I still remember that because it was such a powerful moment.
Yeah.
But that's what it is. That's all it is. Now, practicing that is really hard.
Yes.
And yet, a lot of people get confused. Okay, so how does that manifest itself when a kid is misbehaving? Well, the way it manifests it for me, or if they're losing their attention, is that's not your best self. That's not the self you really want me to be engrossed with.
Right.
That's not, my motivation is for your better self.
Yes.
Now, you have to be very careful not to impose your own values and what you want that kid to be.
Right.
That's why you really have to get to know the person. Like you knew the student who loved ants and the other person whose daughter loved horses. Yeah, I worked with a student who worked with many, who loved video games. He loved them. I think they're ridiculous. I have no interest in them whatsoever. He totally changed my mind on that. I still have no interest in them.
Sure.
But my God, I saw those things could do for him. Flipped me completely. And that was because I became engrossed in something he was engrossed in. And by doing that, we worked together so well. And I remember he came to me because his mother and father said he couldn't focus. Lack of attention.
Yeah.
So I met with him and I read a couple of his papers and I thought, God, these papers, he's telling me he can focus. He would always start with a beautiful vignette before he'd get into the actual academic pieces of his papers, and his vignettes were so compelling. So I'm thinking, okay, I don't know if focus is really the issue here. What's going on? I think there's something bigger, probably some psychodynamic dimension going on. And so eventually I said, well, would you mind bringing in a video game you like to play so I can watch you? And of course, the mother thought I was just being as useless as could be. This is the dumbest and most cavalier idea. He brought it in. I watched that kid play that darn game for an hour, and I saw that kid focus.
Yes.
He can focus.
Oh, absolutely.
That was not the problem. And then when I watched him play the game, I saw not only can he focus, he can make decisions on the spot. He can deal with the consequences of, okay, in those games, he got shot something. He had to make another decision right away. So I started seeing all the critical thinking skills and problem-solving skills he was quite capable of. For some reason, a game drew that out in him. I didn't know why. But when I could start identifying, when you were playing this game, I saw you could make decisions. I saw you could rebound from a mistake right away and make a good decision so you could win. I saw you could handle dealing with a lot of things coming at you. So I could start to identify all the things just by watching him and focusing. He now walked out of that with a sense of, wow, look what I can do.
Yeah.
So instead of diminishing him and making him feel like he's wasting his time, he learned what he could do. I learned what he's capable of. I could apply those to academic assignments that he would then engage in. And I could then say, look at you. You didn't get discouraged by that problem. You persevered.
Fantastic.
So you're not lazy. You actually can really persevere.
Yeah, just finding what really captures kids' attention and bringing them back to it and helping them identify what they're getting from it is so valuable.
And their skills they have. A lot of kids don't realize what skills they have, but when you can start naming those skills, they then can name them in their head. Oh, that's what I'm being asked to do right here. I can do that. Language is so important, and identification of what's being asked of them. So like when I'm giving instructions to someone, I'll name, identify, this is the thinking skill. This is the activity. This is what I'm drawing upon to get you to develop. So it's not a mystery to them.
Right.
And I think you can do this. So it concretizes it too. And for kids who are they aren't paying attention, concretizing something like that really helps.
Sure, absolutely. Well, Joan, this has been absolutely fascinating, and I appreciate you sharing so much of what you've learned and do with us. Are there any last things you want to share with parents and educators who might be listening?
Love your kids for who they are. They're a gift. They've got something every person has something special inside of them. And when you can work from that mindset and do that, and I know it's hard. I mean, when your kid's having a tantrum, that's hard. When your teenager is shutting their door on your face, it's hard not to take that personally. When they say, I hate you, that's hard. But that's when I go back to, that's the hard stuff. Like absolutely. When I realize that kid's not going to love me, but deep down they do.
Of course.
Kids want those boundaries. Kids want that clarity. They want to do well. No one wants to grow up and be a failure. Yeah,
very true. Well, thank you so much. I've really enjoyed this.
I've enjoyed this too. So thank you very much for asking me to be a participant. It was fun to articulate this, and I hope people benefit from it. Because
that's why we're doing this.
I know. Yeah. So I'll let you I don't know where we go from here, how this ends. So I'll let you do all that.
Yep. Well, we're just wrapping up, and I'm going to, end the recording. So thanks.
Can I plug myself?
What's that?
Can I plug my business?
Sure, absolutely.
Oh, JoanBlanusa.com.
And if you would like your child to work with someone who really is caring about how they learn, Joan is definitely the person who can do that.
Yes,
so,
but I am specific, ages 15 and up. And there is a reason why. I don't know what's reasonable to expect of a 13 or 14-year-old. I do know what's reasonable to expect from a freshman on up.
Thanks for giving me your attention for another show. We hope you learned something that you can apply right away. If you enjoyed the show, please rate us wherever you listen to your podcasts so that other people can more easily find the podcast. And remember to subscribe so you don't miss an episode.